Welcome back to the Victory Education Lounge. I'm your host Maurice, and today we're diving into a fascinating evolutionary puzzle. Evolution's Dilemma, Sickle Cell, and Malaria Connection, Part 10. Before we unravel this intriguing relationship, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts or experiences in the comments below. Your engagement helps us reach more curious minds with this vital information. Imagine a world where a genetic mutation that can cause a severe blood disorder is actually beneficial in certain circumstances. This is the paradox we find ourselves in when we examine the relationship between sickle cell disease and malaria. Today, we're going to explore how these two conditions are intertwined in a complex evolutionary dance. Sickle cell disease is a genetic disorder that affects the red blood cells, causing them to form a sickle shape. This abnormality can lead to a host of severe health complications. On the other hand, malaria is a life-threatening disease caused by parasites that are transmitted to humans through the bites of infected female Anopheles mosquitoes. While sickle cell disease and malaria seem unrelated, they are actually intricately linked through a complex dance of evolution. Let's start by understanding the global impact of these two conditions. The World Health Organization estimates that each year, hundreds of thousands of people die from malaria, with the majority of them being children under 5 years old in sub-Saharan Africa. Similarly, sickle cell disease affects millions of people worldwide, with a significant prevalence in regions where malaria is or was endemic. Now here's where the paradox comes in. The same genetic mutation that causes sickle cell disease also provides some protection against malaria. Sounds confusing, right? Well, it's an excellent example of how evolution works. Keeping a potentially harmful gene in the population because it also offers a survival advantage. In regions where malaria is prevalent, individuals carrying one copy of the sickle cell gene, a condition known as sickle cell trait, have some resistance to the disease. This protective effect has led to the persistence of the sickle cell gene in these areas, despite its potential to cause disease when inherited from both parents. This introduces us to the paradoxical relationship between sickle cell disease and malaria. In our next scene, we will delve deeper into the sickle cell mutation and its role in this evolutionary puzzle. So, stay tuned as we unravel this fascinating connection further. Let's take a closer look at the cause of sickle cell disease. At the heart of sickle cell disease, we find a single genetic mutation, a change in the beta-globin gene, which is responsible for producing the protein called hemoglobin. This protein is essential as it carries oxygen throughout our bodies. In a typical scenario, hemoglobin is smooth and round, allowing it to flow freely through our blood vessels. However, with the sickle cell mutation, the shape of the hemoglobin protein changes. It becomes rigid and sticky, and instead of being round, it forms into a sickle or crescent shape. This change can lead to the red blood cells assuming a similar sickle shape, causing them to get stuck in small blood vessels and obstruct the flow of blood and oxygen. This can result in episodes of severe pain, organ damage, and even strokes. This mutation is not something that simply occurs during a person's lifetime. It's inherited, passed down from parents to their children, through their genes. For a child to have sickle cell disease, they must inherit 2 copies of the sickle cell gene, one from each parent. If a child only inherits 1 copy, they will have what's known as sickle cell trait. They won't typically have the disease's symptoms, but they can pass the trait on to their children. Interestingly, while sickle cell trait can still pose health risks, it also provides a measure of protection against a deadly disease that has plagued humans for centuries: malaria. This is where our evolutionary puzzle really begins to take shape. In the grand scheme of evolution, survival is key. And sometimes that means the persistence of traits that may seem harmful or even deadly under different circumstances. In the case of sickle cell disease, a mutation that can cause significant health problems also offers a survival advantage against one of the deadliest diseases known to mankind. This single gene mutation can create a major impact on an individual's life. This is the paradoxical reality of the sickle cell mutation. It's time to explore the unexpected twist in this tale. Now, this may sound counterintuitive, but having 1 copy of the sickle cell gene can actually offer some protection against severe malaria. That's right, the same genetic mutation that leads to a potentially life-threatening blood disorder, when inherited from both parents, can also be a lifesaver in a malarial landscape. You see, the Plasmodium parasite, responsible for malaria, infects red blood cells, multiplying within them and causing havoc in the body. But in individuals with one copy of the sickle cell gene, their red blood cells are a little different. They're prone to sickling under low oxygen conditions, which happens when the malaria parasite is inside. This can lead to the early death of these cells, effectively taking the parasite down with them. But what does this mean for the person carrying this gene? Well, they're less likely to develop severe, life-threatening malaria. In fact, they might even survive a malaria outbreak, while those without the sickle cell trait could succumb to the disease. This survival advantage is significant, especially in regions where malaria is rampant. So, you might be wondering, why hasn't everyone evolved to have this protective sickle cell trait? Well, remember, if a person inherits 2 copies of this gene, one from each parent, they develop sickle cell disease, a serious and often fatal condition. So, while having 1 copy of the gene can protect against malaria, having 2 copies can lead to severe health problems. And that's the crux of this evolutionary dilemma. In regions with high malaria prevalence, the sickle cell gene persists, despite its potential to cause disease. This is because its protective effect against malaria outweighs the risk of developing sickle cell disease. It's a delicate balance, a game of genetic roulette, if you will. This protective effect is the reason why the sickle cell gene has been able to persist. It's a remarkable example of how diseases can drive genetic evolution, and how our bodies, in their quest for survival, can sometimes make unexpected allies. If we map the prevalence of the sickle cell gene, we find a striking pattern. It closely mirrors the historical hotspots of malaria, painting a vivid picture of the evolutionary dance these 2 conditions have been performing for centuries. Let's take a trip around the world to see how this unfolds. In West Africa, both sickle cell trait and malaria are prevalent. Here, studies reveal that individuals with the sickle cell trait have a 50% reduced risk of severe malaria. This offers a clear advantage in an area where malaria is a significant health threat. Our next stop is the Mediterranean region. Ancient Greek texts hint at the presence of malaria, describing symptoms that align with the disease. Fast forward to today, and we find higher rates of sickle cell trait in these areas, suggesting the persistence of the gene due to its protective effect against malaria. In India, particularly among tribal populations in malaria-endemic regions, the frequency of the sickle cell gene can reach as high as 35%. This is an astonishing figure, underscoring the strength of the evolutionary pressure exerted by malaria. Moving on to the Middle East, we find Bedouin populations exhibiting high rates of sickle cell trait. This correlates with the historical presence of malaria in the region, further bolstering the link between these 2 conditions. Finally, let's look at the African American population. Even though there is no current malaria threat in North America, sickle cell rates remain high due to ancestral origins in malaria-endemic regions. This is a poignant reminder of how historical pressures can shape our genetic makeup even today. So whether it's West Africa, the Mediterranean, India, the Middle East, or within the African American population, the geographic distribution of the sickle cell gene and its correlation with malaria hotspots is clear. These examples clearly illustrate the evolutionary connection between sickle cell disease and malaria. Now we must ask ourselves, how can we use this knowledge to our advantage? Well, understanding the delicate dance between sickle cell and malaria allows us to develop potential solutions, strategies, and prevention efforts. Let's explore some of these. First off, there are malaria control programs. These involve implementing widespread mosquito control and prevention measures. The upside? It can reduce the incidence of malaria, potentially decreasing the evolutionary pressure for the sickle cell trait. The downside? It can be costly to implement and maintain, especially in settings where resources are limited. Next, we have genetic counseling. This involves providing information about sickle cell inheritance and the associated risk of malaria. The advantage is that it helps individuals make informed decisions about family planning. However, the downside is that it may not be readily available in all areas, and cultural barriers may exist which could hinder its effectiveness. Then we have combination therapies. These involve developing treatments that address both the symptoms of sickle cell and provide protection against malaria. The upside? It could provide relief for individuals with sickle cell disease while maintaining resistance to malaria. The downside? It's complex to develop and may come with unexpected side effects. Lastly, there's population screening. This involves identifying individuals with the sickle cell trait in regions where malaria is endemic. The benefit is that it allows for targeted malaria prevention. However, implementing it on a large scale can be challenging and resource-intensive. Each of these solutions and strategies comes with its own set of pros and cons. It's a testament to the complexity of the relationship between sickle cell and malaria, a complexity that makes it a fascinating subject to study, but a challenging problem to solve. While we have made strides in understanding this complex relationship, there is still much to learn and explore. Before we wrap up, a quick disclaimer. The information provided in this video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as medical advice. Any health-related decision should be discussed with a licensed physician or qualified healthcare professional, especially if you have existing health conditions or are taking medications. Thank you for joining us on this evolutionary journey in the Victory Education Lounge. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Your engagement helps us create more valuable content and reach those fascinated by the intricate connections in human biology. Until next time, this is Maurice, reminding you that in the tapestry of evolution, every thread tells a story.